Tonight, fit for office. The age factor and mental health, now election issues for presidents and politicians.
Right now, let's face it, we've got a lot of people in leadership positions that are old.
And gender politics.
Without getting this medication, I will go through the wrong puberty.
Access to hormonal therapy as a federal issue.
Plus, defense against a constant threat.
The united message which transcends politics.
Israel's efforts to weaken terrorist organizations.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Raising the age factor in the race for the White House. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Should there be a maximum age limit to serve in federal office? Polls show the majority of Americans say yes.
And the question is gaining new attention and raising concerns after recent incidents with older politicians on both sides of the aisle, and as younger GOP presidential hopefuls try to paint America's oldest president as no longer fit to serve. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson begins our coverage tonight. Abigail.
Well, John, the Constitution explicitly states you must be a minimum of 35 years old to run for the presidency or a U.S. Senate seat and 25 years old to run for Congress. Yet no boundaries exist for a maximum age to hold office. While the majority of Americans currently believe that should change, there are few options to address rising concerns.
Let's face it, we've got a lot of people in leadership positions that are old.
GOP presidential hopeful Nikki Haley has been calling for politicians to undergo some sort of cognitive health screening long before she jumped in the 2024 race.
We seriously need to have a conversation that if you're going to have anyone above a certain age in a position of power, whether it's the House, whether it's the Senate, whether it's vice president, whether it's president, you should have some sort of cognitive test.
Nearly 25% of Capitol Hill lawmakers are over 70 years old. Last week, two incidents brought the age question front and center. First, 81-year-old Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell mysteriously paused for 30 seconds during his weekly news conference.
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press?
As other senators moved in, McConnell walked away, then returned a few minutes later to declare he was fine. The following day, 90-year-old California Senator Dianne Feinstein appeared confused during a committee meeting.
Senator Feinstein.
Yeah, just say aye. Okay, just aye.
Feinstein's almost 3-month absence earlier this year cost her to miss 91 votes, a major problem for Senate Democrats who hold a slim one-seat majority, and led to some in her own party publicly calling for her resignation.
Let's remember, Dianne Feinstein was reelected. Mitch McConnell was reelected. I mean, if it's about we the people, and we the people are voting for these folks, knowing that their age may indeed be a factor, or if it's not a factor, they know that they're up there in age. I mean, ultimately, it's what happens at the ballot box.
It doesn't help that congressional rules favor seniority and more years equal more power. CBN News chief political correspondent David Brody says while we're seeing the beginning stages of calls for cognitive tests, he sees it as a tough political sell.
You know, it's a sensitive issue, especially when it comes to mental health. I think we're seeing the kind of the germination of it at the beginning stages. And I think, sadly, I think what we've seen with President Biden is that it's all come to the forefront because people have legitimate questions as to whether or not, he's mentally capable of doing the job.
If President Biden wins re-election, he will be 86 by the end of his second term. The current GOP frontrunner Donald Trump is 77. If he wins in 2024, he would be just the second person besides Biden to serve as president while in his 80s.
Well, Abigail, you know, we're just a few weeks away now in the month of August from the first Republican presidential debate. And many people are wondering, will President Trump be on the stage? What can you tell us about who to expect to see?
Well, John, so far 7 candidates have qualified, Trump being one of them, and the latest is North Dakota's Governor Doug Burgum. And while former President Donald Trump has easily met the requirements, he's reportedly considering boycotting the debate and holding a competing event instead. And also notable, Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence has met the polling threshold, but still has not hit the 40,000 donors with 220 or more states. But his campaign is expressing confidence that he's close, and he will do so by the time the candidates take the stage on August 23rd in Milwaukee. But we'll see if Trump's there. We'll see if Pence's there. But it's definitely going to be some must-see TV.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much. Of course, one issue facing lawmakers is gender-affirming care for children, and it is at the heart of a heated debate.
That's right, and both sides seemingly agree on the goal of preventing children from harm, but there's disagreement whether the federal government should be taking on that role. CBN Washington correspondent Hillary Powell breaks down the issue.
This rare road trip to Chicago for 11-year-old Flower Nichols of Indianapolis isn't for sightseeing. It's for a reason that's now reached the halls of Congress.
Without getting this medication, I will go through the wrong puberty, therefore making permanent changes to me that I do not want.
Flower Nichols, who has used puberty blockers for 2 years, traveled to see a University of Chicago doctor for a prescription. That's because Indiana passed a law banning minors from getting access to the drugs. It's a growing debate. A recent House subcommittee hearing examined the safety of gender-affirming care for minors with intense testimony.
What you've just heard there is a little sample of barbarism. This is the mutilation of children, and it should be prohibited by our law. This is adults deciding to permanently alter the bodies of children who do not have the capacity to make life-altering decisions on their own.
Gender-affirming care is safe and effective. It is supported by every major medical association.
The debate split along party lines. The committee chairman calls children helpless in making health choices so early, a stance activist Chloe Cole echoes after her decision to detransition.
Before I was able to legally drive, I had a huge part of my future womanhood taken from me. I will never be able to breastfeed. I struggle to look at myself in the mirror at times.
This year, dozens of state legislatures have debated gender-affirming care, making it a touch point for communities nationwide. At least 75 bills are now law, according to Human Rights Campaign, leading the group to declare its first national state of emergency for LGBTQ people.
One licensed therapist says age makes a difference on the impact.
Caution has been applied to children in light of the fact that they do not have the neurological capacity to understand lifelong decisions.
Both sides of the aisle describe children as vulnerable and say they'll gather more facts on whether laws should override the choice of a parent like Flower's mom. For now, she may not need to travel to Chicago as a federal judge's order has put the Indiana law on hold. In Washington, Hillary Powell, CBN News.
Thank you, Hillary. In economic news tonight, new signs of a cooling labor market. A new job openings report out today shows a 2-year low. The Labor Department reports 9.6 million openings last month, about the same as in May. Job openings are at their lowest level since April of 2021 as the Federal Reserve continues interest rate hikes aimed at curbing persistent inflation.
Steve Skanke is Chief Economic Advisor at Kill Point, and he joins us now to discuss more. Steve, welcome to you. So as Jenna was just saying, it may seem counterintuitive when you hear about a cooling labor market, but how can that be good news overall for the economy?
Well, the good news for the economy of a cooling labor market is it puts some slack back into the market, and the upward pressure on wages abates some. You know, the Federal Reserve has been fighting to bring inflation down from, 9.1% about 15 months ago to now about 3%, but they've got a target of 2%. And one of the key pressures in the economy is rising wages. Wage growth has come down to about 4%, but it's still higher than what the Fed needs to get to its 2% target.
Yeah. What kind of effect will data like this have on the Fed's decision to continue with more interest rate hikes?
Well, even with the good news that you mentioned, Jenna, there's still the broader labor market remained resilient. I mean, yes, it's true that job openings have fallen to their lowest level since April 2021, but they're still 2 million higher than the pre-pandemic. And they're not giving, I mean, there is good news, but they're still not showing enough slack in the labor markets. The quits rate, which is, I mean, the good news that you mentioned, the quits rate is down from 2.6% to 2.4%, which means that workers are losing some of the impetus to test labor markets for higher wages. And wages tend to be correlated with the quit rate by a 6-month lag. But the Fed needs unemployment to sort of go from about 3.6% where it is today to about 4.8%, which means about 2 million people more unemployed. And while that works for the Fed, it does inflict a lot of pain on workers and their families.
A lot of pain indeed. You know, going back to the fact that the Fed raised interest rates last week, that of course affects car payments, it affects mortgage rates. Talk about how we could see signs of that affecting consumer behavior at some point. It seems like it hasn't cooled off enough, but do you expect another set of hikes to eventually cool consumer behavior?
Well, the Fed is certainly talking about it, John, and that's one of their policy tools. It's called forward guidance, where they're talking tough. They're being hawkish about this, with the hope that it will impact business decision makers in particular, consumer borrowers for new homes or autos or things that they often buy on credit, to bring some of that demand down. But so far, it hasn't shown much of a result. I mean, the second quarter economic growth number that came out with its first estimate last Thursday showed that the economy was up about 2.5% on an annualized rate. This, in the context of people talking about slowing economy, imminent recession, is just not where the economy is. So yes, the Fed has had some impact, but not to the degree that they really need to have to get their inflation number back to 2%.
All right, Steve Skanke with Keel Point, thank you so much. It's great to see you as always.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you.
Coming up, a notorious anniversary 1 year after the killing of a major terrorist leader. The threat Al-Qaeda poses today.
Welcome back. Today marks 1 year since the killing of top al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri from a U.S. drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan. Zawahiri was second in command to Osama bin Laden during the planning and execution of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He was also wanted for his role in the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, as well as the 2002 bombings of the Indonesian island of Bali.
And for more on this, let's bring in Bill Roggio, Senior Fellow and Editor of the Long War Journal at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Bill, welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. So the 21-year hunt for this man ended August 22nd, last summer, August 2022, excuse me, with a drone strike in Kabul. 1 year later, is al-Qaeda weaker or stronger with him out of the picture?
I would argue that al-Qaeda is stronger today than it was 1 year ago, or it was 2 years ago when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan. Look, we have to face the fact Zawahiri was al-Qaeda's deputy for more than 20 years and served as the leader of al-Qaeda for 11 years before the U.S. actually killed him. We don't have a president, a vice president who's been in office that long, perhaps some senators, or very likely some senators. There isn't a general who's been in charge that long. Al-Qaeda has a bench. It has people that were prepared. Al-Qaeda has only had to have a leadership succession twice since it was formed. The group has safe haven in Afghanistan, where it's running terrorist training camps. It has a strong presence, particularly in Africa these days, in Somalia, in Mali, and in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's still waging effective insurgencies, particularly in countries like Yemen, as well as in Pakistan. If you look at al-Qaeda's footprint today across the world, where it's fighting insurgencies and conducting attacks, it's far greater today than it was on September 11th, 2001.
So, Bill, can you tell us about who is in the leadership structure or leadership command now?
Yeah, the head of al-Qaeda is believed to be a man known as Saif al-Adil. He was al-Qaeda's military leader. He was one of the founding members of al-Qaeda. Again, you know, he's been in the game for well over almost 30 years. I mean, by the way, correcting myself here, Zawahiri's been in the game for over 30 years. Bin Laden was in the game for 20 years. That's how long some of these leaders, you know, U.S. officials like to say that, you know, they have checklists and they check names off, but people replace them. Al-Qaeda leaders don't retire. They don't get cushy board positions and in major industries or hit the golf course. They either die of old age or they die in military operations. And Saif al-Adil, again, he's been in the game for over 30 years. He has military experience. He's believed to be sheltering inside of Iran. If he's not in Iran, he's in Afghanistan, and he's well respected. Al-Qaeda hasn't officially announced his replacement or his succession because Zawahiri's death in Afghanistan is kind of an embarrassment for the Taliban. But by all indications, everything that I could see, there has been little problems with transitioning from Zawahiri over to Saif al-Adil.
Yeah, Bill, does al-Qaeda's lack of presence lately in the media correlate to a loss of ideological influence and its ability to terrorize or inflict fear? Or have we collectively taken our eyes off the ball, you know, from Capitol Hill to Main Street?
We've collectively taken our eye off the ball. The rise of the Islamic State, which really was created to a split within al-Qaeda in 2014. The Islamic State became the shiny object in the room. Everyone focused on it. For instance, in Afghanistan, the U.S. focused its efforts on the Islamic State, which was a minor bit player in the late 2010s, at the expense of letting the Taliban take over the country. And the Taliban and al-Qaeda are, of course, allied. Al-Qaeda is very it's moved to be operating more in the shadows these days. It's directing things behind the scenes. It's more of the Wizard of Oz. It doesn't have to have this overt presence like it did in the mid 2000s, even the 2010s, where it had to take credit for everything. It's done what it set out to do, which is spread the jihad throughout the world, and it's helping local terrorist groups direct operations. U.S. officials will say, well, that's fine. It's focusing on local jihad. But that's how we got 9/11. That's how we got Kenya and Tanzania bombings and the USS Cole and the Indonesia bombings and a host of other attacks across the world. That's al-Qaeda's getting its hooks in these local organizations and using it for its global purpose.
All right, Bill Roggio taking time out of his vacation to talk with us this evening. Thank you so much, Bill, with Foundation for Defense of Democracy. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Oh, a pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, never-ending threats to the nation. With Israel under constant risk of attack, the work being done to weaken forces aligning against the Jewish state.
Well, the modern state of Israel officially celebrated its 75th anniversary earlier this year, and since its founding back in 1948, wars are a constant threat to the survival of the Jewish nation.
As Chris Mitchell reports from Israel's Knesset, one group is addressing the question, what measures can Israel take to weaken the terror groups that aim to wage war on the Jewish state?
Two members of parliament, one from the governing coalition and another from the opposition, hosted this meeting of the Israel Victory Caucus. They believe Israel should be more proactive and take steps to weaken its enemies to keep them from waging war against Israel.
In the last 30 years, we've lost something. The Jewish people knew how to win battles. We knew how to win in 1948. No one asked himself if in 1948 Israel was established or not, if Israel won or lost. We knew how to win in 1967, but since the Oslo Accords, we forgot how to win. In the last few years, last 30 years, we're not winning anymore. And I think we should go back to winning.
The Middle East Forum helped host the meeting. One aim is to stop wars before they begin.
This is a united message which transcends politics and allows individuals to focus on defense as a priority for the state rather than it just being something which is a side policy issue. The policy towards Gaza, at least from what we're recommending to the government, is a complete disarmament of Hamas in Gaza, meaning that there is no ability for them to wage war against the Jewish state in the future.
To achieve that goal, they released this policy paper on disarming Gaza, written by the former IDF Chief of Intelligence, retired General Yossi Kupavasser.
My message is that we have to reassess our strategy towards Gaza. And the strategy that we practice today allows Hamas to arm itself to its teeth in between the rounds of violence. This is against our interest because it makes Hamas not only stronger vis-à-vis Israel itself and able to hit Israel everywhere as they wish and threaten Israel. We should adopt a new policy that after the next round of atrocities, that Hamas should know in advance that after the next round of atrocities, we should not allow it to rearm itself.
Rabbi Leo D. also addressed the meeting. Earlier this year, his wife and 2 daughters were murdered in a terror attack. He appealed to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to fund or support what he sees as another enemy of Israel, the Palestinian Authority.
And what happens is they're spending $300 million a year financing terrorists, such as the family of those who killed my wife and daughters. And they're also publishing textbooks which incite violence, that laud terrorists. And they're running summer camps at the moment where the kids are running around with banners with the pictures of the 3 murderers of my wife and daughters and learning how to shoot and to stab Jews all over the world.
Whether it's Hamas in Gaza or the Palestinian Authority, most agreed the next war is not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And they want Israel to be prepared to win. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Knesset, Jerusalem.
All right, thank you, Chris. Coming up, not a single dry eye or feet in this unique wedding ceremony. We explain next on Faith Nation.
All right, finally tonight, for better or for worse, when a typhoon hit the Philippines, causing landslides and flooding this weekend, a bride and groom put their wedding vows to the test.
You can say that again. The couple refused to let a typhoon stop their wedding and decided to hold the ceremony in not just a church, but a flooded church. Rather than walking on rose petals, the bride waded through ankle-deep water toward her groom, with the train of her white gown and veil floating behind her in that murky water, as you can see. The couple said they just wanted to be married, even if that meant having a ceremony without any guests. To their surprise, many actually did show up and take part in what was indeed a memorable wedding day.
They had a lot of people there.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Have a great night.